Hey there, Story Guy family. Welcome back to the channel where every story brings you drama, intrigue, and maybe just a little scandal to spice up your day. Today, I need your help. I want to know what kind of stories you love the most. Are you hooked on tales of betrayal and redemption, like the cheating wife dramas? Do you prefer the warm and fuzzy feels of a classic romance? Or maybe you're craving something darker, a thriller packed with twists and turns that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Let me know in the comments below what you want to hear more of. This channel is all about you and the stories you can't stop thinking about. So don't hold back, spill the tea, and tell me what grabs your attention. And hey, if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Together, we're crafting the ultimate library of stories you won't want to miss. Alright, enough from me. Let's dive into today's tale. But first, don't forget to share your favorite genres in the comments. Let's create something amazing together.
Jim Fox was a devoted family man who worked hard to take care of his wife Helen and their daughter Emily in Pennsylvania. He had been moving up in his job, and life seemed stable for them. Although their marriage had some challenges, Jim believed they had a strong connection. However, Helen felt a growing restlessness and quietly wished for more excitement in her life. Over time, her dissatisfaction deepened, leading her to seek attention outside their marriage. While Jim concentrated on his career, he was unaware of Helen's feelings, trusting that their relationship was secure. When he eventually discovered her unfaithfulness, it was a heavy blow. One morning, Jim woke up feeling uneasy after a rough night's sleep. He had seen Emily's boyfriend with another girl at the mall. They were close, and Jim knew it would hurt Emily to find out, especially with an important volleyball match coming up. So, Jim decided to wait until after the game to tell her. Later, he was called to a meeting with his boss and was introduced to Ralph Jenkins, the former owner of a newly acquired plant in Daytona Beach. Jim was offered a promotion to manage the maintenance team there, along with a 25% pay raise and a rent-free apartment for a year. He accepted the offer right away, hoping Helen would be excited about moving to a warmer place. After the meeting, Jim drove Ralph to the airport, feeling optimistic. He thought Emily could finish her last semester in Daytona and possibly move on from her boyfriend. But as he left the airport, he noticed a red Camry parked at a nearby motel. It resembled Helen's car, which had been recently damaged. He felt a sense of unease and decided to park nearby. Concerned about what he might uncover, Jim waited in a company car that Helen wouldn't recognize. He wanted to gather more information, so he lightly punctured her spare tire, thinking she would call him if she needed help. Then he waited, feeling tense and anxious about what would unfold. About half an hour later, Jim heard a voice near his car window. "What do I do now?" Helen said quietly. Her companion replied, "No problem, I can help you." Jim felt his heart sink as he listened. "I don't have a spare tire. My husband didn't put the wheel back after fixing it," Helen complained. "That's not the best plan," her friend chuckled lightly. "I shouldn't have come with you today." "What should we do?" Helen asked. "Let's go back to our room while I call for assistance," her companion suggested, and they went back into the motel. Jim waited for her to reach out, contemplating how to respond, but his phone never rang. Then, about 20 minutes later, Jim felt even worse when he saw Emily's Honda Civic drive into the parking lot. She walked up to the motel, knocked on the door, and then returned with a tire from her trunk. "Frank, please take care of this so Emily can play tonight. She needs to stay focused," Helen said as she and her friend approached. "Thanks, Mom," Emily replied, unaware of the situation unfolding around her. "If you cared, you would have gotten ready before I got here. I need to get to school and get going." "Can you take it from here?" Emily asked, clearly upset. "No problem," Frank replied. "I'll get a ride to Home Depot and I'll be at your game tonight." "Thanks, Frank. Just don't sit too close to Mom. Dad will be there, and I don't want any trouble." "Don't worry, I won't cause any problems," Frank laughed. "Your dad won't even notice." "What's going on, Frank? Don't talk about Jim like that." "He's my husband and Emily's father. He deserves respect," Helen interjected. Emily shot back. "Respect after everything that's happened. I just want to finish school and move on. I told you, I care about your father and we won't be getting a divorce. We'll grow old together." Helen insisted. "You're mistaken. Dad won't put up with this forever, and Frank isn't worth it. You're just using each other while you can." Emily replied, Dad has put just as much into this marriage. Your father? He's not like that. He's a good husband and father, Helen laughed. Emily pointed at Frank. Frank seems nice, but he's not being honest with his family. If he really cared, he wouldn't be here. Enough, Emily. This isn't up for discussion. Get to school and focus. Frank and I will be at your game. That doesn't make me feel any better, Emily mumbled. Just keep him away from Dad. Frank may not see it, but Dad's not easy to handle. Emily drove off, leaving Helen and Frank alone as he worked on his tire. She's not too happy about us, is she? My daughter would react the same way. That's why I keep this from her and my wife. Emily knows what's happening and is being quiet to avoid further complications, Helen reassured him. Meanwhile, Jim sat in the back seat of the work car, feeling confused long after Helen had driven away. Finding out about her relationship was hard, but learning that Emily knew and accepted it hurt even more. He remembered Emily's volleyball match was about to start, and for the first time in her high school years, he would miss it. Feeling too upset to face his family, he went home, had a few beers, and thought about his future. The thought that Helen might not want to move to Daytona because of her relationship hit him hard. He bitterly remembered how loyal he had been, and how that trust had been misused. Jim realized Helen didn't know about the move to Florida and would think he was going to Michigan. He considered going to Florida alone, which might give him time to work out his family issues while she stayed in Pennsylvania. The idea appealed to him as a small act of independence. With the weekend coming up, Jim decided to head to Daytona after Thanksgiving. His wife and daughter would think he was going to Michigan, which would give him some needed space. After taking some medicine to help him sleep and enjoying another beer, Jim prepared for the night in the guest room. He put away his clothes and personal items, locked the door, and tried to relax. Worry kept Jim awake for a while. Emily noticed her father's truck in the garage and wondered why he hadn't come to her game. Helen was surprised to see the empty beer cans and went to check on him. Eventually, they found Jim fast asleep in the guest room and couldn't wake him. Emily suspected he must have been drinking, which puzzled her. "We'll ask him in the morning," Helen suggested, noting that he sometimes chose to sleep in another room to avoid feeling unwell. She advised Emily not to be too hard on him. Helen also mentioned that Frank thought Emily played well and might earn a scholarship, which frustrated Emily. "I don't care what Frank thinks," Emily retorted. "He's not someone I want to see again." "Why can't you be happy for me?" Helen replied. "Frank makes me feel young." "I'm worried about Dad. If he learns about Frank, it will hurt him," Emily said. "That's why he can't find out," Helen responded. "I give your father all the affection he needs. Frank just provides a different kind of companionship." "Keep telling yourself that, Mom," Emily replied. "But if you continue on this path, Dad will figure it out, even if I don't say anything. He won't suspect a thing if you keep quiet," Helen insisted. "Your father trusts me completely." At 5 a.m., Jim quietly got up, dressed, and left the house. After eating breakfast at IHOP, his phone rang. "Jim, are you okay?" Helen asked, concerned. "You missed Emily's match last night, and that's not like you." "I just wanted to be a little unpredictable," Jim said before hanging up and turning off his phone. Jim spent the morning packing his tools and belongings into his truck, preparing to move. As the day went on, he felt more confident about starting anew in Florida. He knew he had to keep his plans under wraps until after Thanksgiving, so Helen and Emily would think he was heading somewhere colder. When Jim returned home, Helen confronted him about missing Emily's match and acting differently. 2 days ago, he might have felt guilty, but now he didn't mind her displeasure. He simply nodded and left the house to eat at a sports pub. To his surprise, he found he could still enjoy himself after a few drinks and some pleasant conversation with the other patrons. He came back home around 11 p.m. to find Helen and Emily watching a movie. Helen made a pointed comment about his absence and asked for an apology. "Okay," Jim muttered as he gathered his clothes for the next day and headed to the guest room. As he left, Emily observed, "He doesn't seem to care that you're upset. It's as if he prefers sleeping in the guest room." "You don't know your father," Helen replied with a smile. "He won't last 2 nights before coming back," she said confidently. "Maybe," Emily said, sounding less certain. "But I hope he doesn't find out about Frank." "Stop saying his name," Helen insisted. "I want to keep this a secret." Emily just shook her head. "If he's not ready to be with you, maybe it's on you to help him grow up." Helen was surprised by her daughter's bold words. Emily had promised to keep Frank a secret to prevent her parents from splitting up, but her attitude was becoming more challenging. Helen found it hard to be a caring mother and partner, knowing her daughter knew about her secret. She also wondered why Jim had changed in the last few days. He was acting strangely, and she didn't want to endure it, but she believed he would come around. Jim woke up early again on Sunday. He had breakfast at IHOP and took a long walk in the park, enjoying the cool morning air of November. He liked being outside, knowing he would soon move to Florida and leave the cold behind. He got back home before noon with some drinks, turned on the TV, and settled in to watch the football game. Helen didn't talk to him for an hour before leaving the house in frustration. She came back around 6:30, and by 7 o'clock dinner was not ready. When Jim noticed this, he turned off the TV and decided to go out. He ended up at a local sports pub enjoying some ribs while watching the game. The Eagles had won against the Giants, and Jim felt happy. He looked ahead to Thanksgiving when they would play against the Cowboys. "Dad has been acting odd lately, don't you think?" Emily asked her mother. "He usually watches the games. Did you two have a disagreement?" "We hardly spoke," Helen replied. "I told him he needed to be more considerate if he wanted to sleep in our bed again. I also said I wouldn't cook for him until his attitude changed. He'll miss my cooking and attention and come around soon." When Jim got home, the football game was already one-sided, so he left the bar early. He walked past Helen and Emily and headed straight to the guest room. Helen felt an unexpected tension. For the next 3 days, Jim stayed quiet, showing no sign of wanting to mend things. His stubbornness worried her. On Tuesday, Helen met Frank at the motel, but she had another flat tire. This made her think the flat tires weren't just bad luck, so she decided not to return to the motel again. Luckily, she had fixed the spare tire on Monday, and Frank helped her with it. Meanwhile, Jim spent Monday packing for his move. He arranged his clothes carefully, trying to make it seem like he hadn't packed a lot. He wondered if Helen would notice he didn't take any warm clothing. On Monday and Tuesday afternoons, Jim waited at Home Depot for his wife to finish work. After working, she usually went grocery shopping, so Jim parked at his favorite bar for dinner and Monday night football. "Is Dad coming home today?" Emily asked her mother. "Who knows?" Helen sighed. "He's not talking to me and is still sleeping in the guest room. I don't know what's wrong with him," Emily remarked. "Do you think he found out?" "You told him he couldn't stay over and that you wouldn't be cooking for him," Helen replied. "So why would he come home? Maybe you should forgive him and prepare a nice dinner tomorrow night." "I can't. I'm meeting Frank." "You'll have to manage with leftovers. I'll be home later," Emily pointed out. "Frank's more considerate in this situation. At least Frank treats me well and doesn't overlook me," Helen responded. "But does he help with the chores or contribute to the bills?" Emily asked. "Of course not," Helen snapped. "Frank just enjoys spending time with you." Emily retorted, "Dad handles everything, and you think Frank is the best because he flatters you. You expect so much from Dad, yet you give Frank what he doesn't deserve. That's not fair." Angrily, Helen replied, "I'm your mother. Show some respect. Dad wants your respect, too." "But he's not earning it," Emily argued. "Respect has to be earned, not just asked for." That evening, Emily stopped Jim as he walked through the living room. "Our big game is tomorrow at 4. Can you come?" "I'll see what I can do," Jim said before heading upstairs. "I think he's upset with me, but I haven't done anything," Emily sighed. "He's just in a strange mood," Helen tried to reassure her. "He's bothered about something but doesn't know how to talk about it. I'm sure he'll come to your game." She pointed to Jim's truck in the garage. The next evening, Emily was in tears when Jim didn't show up for her match. "He didn't want to come. Why is he upset with me?" she asked. "That's a good question," Helen said sadly. "Let's find out what's going on." Helen returned home around 6:30, and by 7 o'clock another empty six-pack was on the counter with no sign of Jim. "It's only 8 o'clock, Helen said, worried. "He could already be in bed again." They found Jim fast asleep in the guest room and couldn't wake him. Frustrated, they moved to the living room. "Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. Will you let Dad join us?" Emily asked. "Of course," Helen replied. "His parents and mine will be here. This is his home, and I won't keep him away. Hopefully he'll be in a better mood by then." "Who did you invite, Mom? Please tell me it's not Frank." "Frank and his wife are coming. I think he and Jim will get along. They both enjoy football and hunting, Helen explained. But one thing they share is you, Emily pointed out. This is not ideal. I still believe they'll connect. Jim needs more friends, Helen insisted. You're mistaken. This won't end well, Emily said. We'll see, Helen replied confidently. Jim woke up early on Thanksgiving and went to a small cafe for breakfast. He returned home around 9 a.m. to the smells of turkey and pie. Dinner's at noon, Helen announced. Our families will be here soon. Do you want something to drink? Jim shook his head, sat in the living room, and turned on the TV. Not interested in Helen's attempts to make things better, he greeted her parents nicely when they arrived, and a few minutes later, he welcomed his own parents, too. During dinner, Jim shared some unexpected news. I'm being moved to another location. I leave tomorrow, and this could last until spring or even longer. Helen was taken aback. Why hadn't he told her sooner? She didn't want to move to Michigan, and this might explain his recent mood. That's surprising, Helen's mother remarked. Will you take Helen with you? I'll go alone, Jim said. It wouldn't be fair to make Emily change schools or for Helen to leave her job. I can manage on my own for a while. The grandparents began discussing Michigan's weather as Helen and Emily exchanged worried looks. After dinner, Jim, his father, and Helen's father sat down to watch the Eagles game, thinking Jim was upset about leaving his family. They were feeling let down by the team's poor performance and were only half watching the pregame show for the next game when the doorbell rang. Jim didn't pay much attention until Helen introduced a couple in the hallway. This is Nancy and her husband Frank, she said, naming everyone in the room with Jim last. Frank, smiling, walked up to Jim in his Dallas Cowboy sweater. Hello, Jimmy, I've heard a lot about you, Frank said, shaking his hand. Jim, who had been holding in a lot of feelings, unexpectedly snapped. He kicked Frank hard and then hit him, causing Frank to fall to the floor. Everyone was shocked. Nancy cried out and rushed to help Frank, while Helen became unwell and Emily quickly got ice and a cloth. Feeling stunned by what he had just done, Jim grabbed his coat and left the house. He drove south on Highway 81, stopping only when he reached Hillsville, Virginia, where he rented a room and fell asleep quickly. The next morning, Jim turned on his phone to find it filled with messages, which he had expected. After listening to a few, he deleted them all, ignoring calls from his mother, Helen, and Emily, who wanted to know where he was. Jim decided to stick to his plan and continued driving south on Highway 77. As he drove, he kept thinking about what had happened the day before. He felt Frank deserved what he got. But what would happen next? Would he face arrest? Lose his job before he reached Daytona? Or have problems at home? Realizing he needed to understand the situation better, he decided to keep his phone on but wouldn't answer any calls. Checking his messages, after a caller hung up, Helen reached out again within 30 minutes. After waiting a moment, Jim read her text. Jim, call me. I know the transfer has upset you, but you need to get it together. Frank needs surgery, but he won't press charges. Please call me. Jim drove all day and arrived at his new apartment by 5 p.m. He took the key from a safe outside, unpacked, parked his truck in the garage, and went to bed by 7 o'clock, ready for his new job with 2 days off ahead. Jim noticed a few issues with the apartment and planned to address them on Saturday. He was concerned that Helen might find out about the new job and try to get involved, so he decided to call her on Saturday morning. Hello? Hi, Helen, it's Jim. Where have you been? We called all night, but your phone was off. Are you okay? Frank had an incident because of a disagreement over a football team. What were you thinking? Jim hung up, turned off his phone, and wrote down a list of things he needed to buy. An hour later, he returned with a new door lock, an air filter, some cleaning supplies, and a pack of drinks. At noon, he called Emily. Hi, Dad. I'm glad you called after the situation with Frank. He had to go to the hospital and everyone was worried about you. Mom thought there might be trouble. I had to help out while Mom took Nancy to the hospital. Did anything else happen? No, it's been quiet, Jim replied. But there's one more thing. Mom's upset. Did you hang up on her again? Yeah, I could tell, admitted Jim. I called to let you know I got a new job starting Monday in case the police ask where I am. Don't worry, Emily said. Frank didn't press any charges, though I think his wife wanted him to. The police aren't looking for you. But why are you being secretive about your job change? Is that why you've been acting differently? The job change made me rethink some things. I realized I need to value myself to earn others' respect. I've lost my way for a while, but I'm getting back on track. Are you okay, Dad? Is there anything wrong? Emily asked, concerned. Not really. You and your mom have an idea of what's going on, Jim said sadly. Just tell her I'm fine and not to worry. Okay, Dad. I'll call you sometimes. Will you answer? Jim felt frustrated with himself. He loved Emily, but her attitude upset him. He didn't want to lose her, even though he felt hurt. If you call while I'm working, I'll answer. He paused. What about Mom? Can she call? Emily insisted. Will you answer if she just wants to tell me off? She shouldn't bother, Jim replied quickly. But if there's a family issue, she should reach out. That's fair, right? I'll let her know. Good luck with the new job and stay warm. Is it cold there now? It's better than I thought. Don't worry, I'm fine. Goodbye. As soon as Emily hung up, Helen started asking questions. What did he say? Did he apologize? Is he scared to come home? What did he say about me? He doesn't seem scared at all, Emily replied. He said no one would respect him unless he respected himself. That's why he distanced himself from Frank and keeps ending calls. If I want to talk to him, I need to be more respectful, Helen said. He's the one who started trouble at our home over a t-shirt and continues to hang up. Next time I talk to him, I'll express my thoughts, Helen vowed. And that's why he's hanging up. He won't listen if you're disrespectful. Frank is the only one who benefits from this unless you find more boyfriends, Emily shot back. Why do you keep saying unkind things? Helen asked. Because you've been disrespectful, she replied. Frank chuckled at Dad, not just because the Cowboys won against the Eagles, but because he had been unkind to Dad. That would upset anyone, but Dad didn't know. Frank was hinting. Helen shook her head. She knew Frank was being unreasonable, so she stood up to him. You can't be rude in someone else's home. Any man would be upset, even if he didn't know his partner was not being honest, Helen stated. I'm done discussing this. You live under my roof, and you will show me respect. On Wednesday evening, Jim was by the pool when his phone rang. He saw it was Helen, but let it go to voicemail. Later, he checked the message. Jim, I know you're not answering my calls. Please call me back. We need to decide some things about the house, like who will clear the driveway, if we should sign a fuel oil delivery contract, and which company to use. Please call. Not hearing any anger, Jim decided to call Helen back. She had important questions, and he wanted to help. Thanks for calling, Jim, Helen said calmly. I'm worried about the things you usually take care of around the house. With the snow coming, what should I do? I'll make a list and email it to you, Jim promised. Good idea, Helen said. Are you coming home for Christmas? Mom and Dad invited us for dinner, and your parents want to see us on Christmas Eve. It's tough telling them you're not answering their calls. I don't know my schedule yet. If I can, I'll come home. You can tell them that. But they need to be kind if they want me to respond. Every message I get feels unfriendly, and I don't want that, Jim insisted. I'll let them know, but I'm not sure it will change anything. They weren't happy about how you treated Frank or that you left, Helen said carefully. So there's no point in me coming for Christmas, right? I'm not going there just to feel unwanted. If they want me there because they appreciate my presence, that's different, Jim said. You can still come home, Helen said, surprising Jim with her tears. Emily and I would love to see you. We'll try to be considerate. Do you miss being close with me? Jim didn't want to feel close to Helen anymore after what he had learned about Frank, but he responded gently. I've always valued the times we shared. They were meaningful. He didn't mention that he felt he was getting second best. I agree, Helen said, crying. You are the best partner and I miss you. Please come home for Christmas. Let's see if you can stay for the week. I'll check, Jim said. They usually don't give time off on short notice, especially during that week. But I'll let you know. I'll also email you the list of things to prepare for winter. Helen smiled after they hung up. Emily asked if Frank was really the best partner in the world. She knew her father wouldn't like that. He believed he was the best. I've told you to be careful saying things about Frank, she advised. Emily's mother was actually better than Frank, but Frank was definitely more fun. When Frank found out, he would be happy. Emily's mother believed Frank was better than her past boyfriends. What husband wouldn't feel proud of that? But Emily saw her mother leave the room in tears. Jim, on the other hand, was enjoying his new life. He swam every day, got a nice tan, and felt relaxed. He was confident in handling the equipment at the plant. What surprised him was all the single women living in his condo who seemed to enjoy his company. Once the women found out he could fix things, they kept asking for his help. This did not bother him because they often showed their appreciation with baked goods, meals, or drinks left at his door, especially around the holidays. Helen urged Jim to come home for Christmas. After fixing a closet door for Mrs. Struthers, he turned to see her looking vulnerable. "Jim, I don't have much money, but I have needs. Will you spend time with me?" she asked. Jim hesitated. He had never thought about being with anyone else since he had always been with his wife. Susan was attractive, but he needed to focus on his marriage first. "I need to think about my marriage. After Christmas, I'll know better," he replied. He had never been unfaithful, but things might change. "I understand," Susan said, wrapping herself again. "If you decide to end things with your wife, there will be many women here ready to offer you companionship." Jim called Helen to say he would try to be home for Christmas Eve. He was pleased to hear how happy she sounded, realizing he missed both Helen and Emily. He decided to head north, planning to drive halfway on the first day, shop on the second, and get home just before Christmas Eve. When Jim arrived at his street at 9 a.m., he noticed several cars in his driveway. Recognizing a few, he realized Helen was hosting her usual holiday gathering for her friends. As he walked toward the door, he saw Frank in the kitchen. Anger bubbled up inside him, but he didn't want to ruin the holiday spirit. So he quietly entered through the basement to wait for Frank to leave. After resting on an old sofa, Jim woke up 2 hours later. Hearing no noise from upstairs, he peeked out and saw only one car left. Curious, he went to the front door and spotted Helen and Frank in the kitchen. Frank leaned in, and Jim's anger flared up again. He fought the urge to confront them, knowing that wouldn't be wise. Instead, he planned to sneak upstairs, take some pictures, and then head to Florida. Jim entered the house, climbed the stairs quietly, and hid in the guest room. Turning off the lights, he waited. Eventually, Helen went to the master bedroom, and Jim heard the shower turn on. He assumed she was preparing for Frank. Jim turned off the hallway light and waited in the dark. He knew that Frank would be close enough to see when he reached the top of the stairs. When that moment came, Jim gave him a quick kick that sent Frank tumbling down. Frank landed at the bottom, not moving. The water was still running, and Helen hadn't noticed anything. As Jim's anger faded away, he started to worry. If Frank was really hurt, he could get into big trouble. Jim rushed down the stairs, stepped over Frank, and left the house. 2 hours later, he was already 100 miles away. He decided to keep driving until he found a cheap motel just before dawn. He paid with cash. After a short rest, he continued south, thinking about what had happened. He had hurt Frank, and depending on how serious it was, things could escalate. Jim understood that he needed to stay away from Frank and Helen to avoid getting into more trouble. In truth, he felt lonely without Helen. She and Emily had meant everything to him, but he realized he had to let go. Around noon, his phone rang, but when he saw it was his parents, he let it go to voicemail. He wasn't ready to explain why he missed Christmas Eve dinner or what had happened with Frank. A little later, he built up the courage to listen to the message. "Jim, it's your father. Call us when you get this. Something serious happened at your house. But Helen and Emily are fine," Jim called back right away. "What happened?" he asked when his father picked up. "Son, it's about Frank. He was at your house again last night. He fell down the stairs and is hurt badly. He has a broken jaw, arm, ribs, and another concussion. His wife found out he was with Helen and got there before the ambulance. There was quite a scene." Jim's father continued. "After Thanksgiving, we thought you might have overreacted. Now we see why you did what you did. Your mother and I are proud of you. You showed more self-control than I would have." Jim felt relieved and thanked his dad. "How's Emily? Was she home during all this?" "That's another matter. Emily had a serious talk with us this morning. She was at a friend's house but admitted she knew about Helen. She was trying to navigate the situation until school ended before telling you. We're disappointed, but we were able to discuss things openly." "Thanks for helping Emily through this," Jim said. "Where are you staying?" his father asked. "You mentioned a transfer, but it seems extreme to move to Michigan in winter. I got transferred to Daytona Beach. I received a promotion, a big raise, and I have a small apartment. I'm the maintenance supervisor now. Jim explained. That's fantastic. Would it be okay if your mom and I visited in February? We'll be tired of winter by then. Anytime, Dad. Just don't tell Helen where I am. I don't want to talk with her right now. I understand, Jim, but you really should check in on Emily. She's feeling pretty down about everything. She thinks you knew about the situation since you've been distant. Did you know she felt that way? I need to go, Dad. We can discuss it more later. Thanks for your support. Love you both, Jim said before ending the call. He went back to his apartment as night fell on Christmas Eve, feeling sad about spending his first Christmas alone. He turned on the TV, opened a beer, and sat on the couch, lost in thought. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. I saw your light and came to wish you a Merry Christmas, Susan Struthers said. It's not good to be alone on Christmas. Your being here tells me you haven't made up with your wife. That's a fair guess, Jim replied. Her boyfriend is going to sleep in my bed. I dislike crowds unless it's just a few women. What about just one woman? Susan asked, stepping a bit closer. I might make you move a little, but I think you won't mind. Jim thought about Susan's offer and decided he would like that. I should warn you, though, I haven't been with anyone in a long time, so I might not be very good at it. Otherwise, my wife wouldn't have turned elsewhere. I doubt you're the issue, Susan said. A kind and caring man like you is sure to be great. Do you have any protection? Jim was taken aback. No, I haven't used that in years. He realized he had a lot to learn about dating. Your partners will appreciate it if you do. It's a smart choice, Susan encouraged him. Jim had a nice Christmas Eve, and his feelings of anger toward Helen and Emily began to fade. They were replaced by happier thoughts that lifted his spirits. Though the hurt from their betrayal was still there, he started to let go. Susan helped him see that life could still be enjoyable. She left early on Christmas morning to avoid any talk, but they agreed to meet at the pool later that evening. They enjoyed a home-cooked meal and felt a growing connection. Jim returned home by 9 p.m., aware that others might have noticed his visits to Susan's place. A few minutes after he got home, his phone rang. Dad, you didn't come home for Christmas? I don't blame you. Mom's not doing well, and I feel bad too. I'm sorry for what happened. I knew it was wrong, but why did you two stay together until I finished school? Jim asked. That's in the past, he replied. But I won't pretend it didn't hurt when I found out. I never knew Mom was so unhappy, and I didn't expect you to keep it a secret. I'm trying to get through this, but it's tough. The strange part is, Mom isn't unhappy with you. She says you're a good husband and father. She just wanted to try something new and feels sorry about it now. Did you know about her and Frank on Thanksgiving? Yes, Jim said. I should have dealt with it better, but Frank crossed the line with his behavior. I understand, the son replied. I saw Frank smile and knew he was showing off. Mom said it was about a shirt, but I knew better. Did you miss my last 2 matches because you were upset with me? I'm sorry, but when Frank said he would be there, I knew my presence would stir up trouble. Do you remember that day when I brought the spare tire? You let air out of it, didn't you? You wanted Mom to call you for help, but I ended up getting involved instead. I'm really sorry, Dad. I was thinking only about myself, and now I see the consequences. Don't blame yourself. I should have faced Mom right then, but I was too upset. I might have made things worse. I doubt you'd hurt Mom, but Frank's actions are another story. Grandpa mentioned that Frank had an accident at our house last night. He's hurt, but he will heal. By the way, I found the laptop you left for me last Thanksgiving in the basement. Thank you so much. I'll use it a lot, especially for college next year. I'm glad you liked it, Jim said, realizing he had forgotten about the gifts he left. Did you see the one for Mom? She was very touched when she received the pearls. It made her think more about her actions. It's funny. I only found the gifts a few days before Christmas when I was looking for new lights for the tree. Thank you for being such a wonderful dad. I'm starting to see how much you care. Don't be upset. When I was your age, I thought my parents were out of touch, but they really showed me wisdom over the years. Jim smiled. I just want you to be happy and lead a good life. Don't worry about me. I love you, Dad. Maybe I'll come to visit you this winter. I didn't share the whole story about my job transfer. The company moved me to Daytona Beach. I have a small place, and you're welcome to visit any time. There's a pool outside, and the beach is just a few blocks away. Really? If Mom and I knew that, we would have wanted to come with you. But I understand why you didn't tell us. We didn't deserve it after how we acted. I don't blame you for keeping things quiet. This news will be tough for Mom. You don't have to tell her right away, but it's not a secret anymore. I'll email her my address so we can take care of the divorce without me having to return home. I was worried to ask you. Are you divorcing Mom? I understand, and I don't hold it against you. I warned her about Frank, but she thought you wouldn't find out. I wish things were different. Good night, Dad. I'll try to come visit. Good night, and Merry Christmas. Emily had just put her phone away when her mother walked in. Did I hear correctly that your father isn't in Michigan? Where is he? Why didn't he tell us? He's at his company's new place in Daytona Beach, Emily answered. He didn't lie. He mentioned his transfer, and we assumed it was Michigan. He didn't share everything because of the call you made about the spare tire at the motel. He knew what was going on and didn't want to involve us. Why didn't he say anything then? Was he scared of Frank? Helen asked. Scared of Frank? Are you serious? Emily replied. Dad, show Frank who's really in charge. Frank can't compete with you when it comes to fighting or raising a family. You always look for flaws in Dad to explain your choices. Make sure you treat your next partner better than how you treated Dad. Next partner? What did your father say? Helen asked, worried. He's had enough of your lies. He's thinking about divorce, just like I told you he would. I don't want a divorce. I don't even like Frank. None of this would have happened if he hadn't fallen down the stairs, Helen complained. Didn't you understand? You were in trouble. When I brought you that spare tire at the motel, Dad was there. He saw everything and knew how we treated him. He knows you weren't honest. By Thanksgiving, in his eyes, you were already divorced. Frank isn't the issue, you are. Maybe now that Frank's wife is leaving him, you two can be together, Emily suggested. I don't want Frank. I want Jim back, Helen cried. The next day got even worse for Helen. Emily called her father to share the latest news. Mom got a letter from the health department. Frank has an infection, and now Mom must get tested and tell everyone she has been with. You're on her list, and you'll get a letter soon. Wow, I should have seen this coming. I'll make an appointment today. Thanks for telling me right away. I appreciate you looking out for me. I was confused for a while, but I'm back on track. Take care, Dad. Jim quickly arranged for a checkup and was relieved that Susan had been careful enough to avoid spreading anything Helen might have passed on. On his way home, he bought a variety of protective items and placed them on his bedside table. He promised himself he would never risk spreading something preventable. As time went on, Jim got his test results and was happy to learn he was healthy. His free time was filled with requests from the women in his building to help with different tasks. He became more popular, and one evening, Susan admitted she had told a couple of women about his skills. News spread, and Jim found himself regularly restocking his supplies. The women who visited appreciated his thoughtfulness, which only made him more well-liked. One afternoon before Easter, Jim was surprised when Emily arrived with a small suitcase. Before he could say anything, she hugged him tightly. I'm so sorry, Dad. Please forgive me and let me stay for a few days. I can leave if you want. Jim, taken aback but glad to see her, said, You're always welcome here. Let me show you the room. You look so grown up. I told you I've finally changed in all the right ways. Emily smiled. You look more like Mom now. Mom's been losing weight. I got a ride with some friends heading to Orlando, and they dropped me here. I knew you'd let me stay. It's spring break, and I'll only be here for 4 days before going back to the cold. I think this place is wonderful. I can see you enjoy living here. It's smaller than our home, but it has everything I need, including a warm pool right outside, Jim said as Emily looked around. Looks like you've got everything you want, she laughed, noticing some unexpected items in his bedroom. You deserve to be happy after everything, Dad, she continued. I won't get in your way. I'll just relax by the pool while you work. I haven't enjoyed the sun in ages. Tomorrow night we'll go out for dinner, Jim replied. There are some great places around here. Ribs, steak, seafood, you name it. I'll take you to a spot where my work friends hang out so they can see how lovely my daughter is. The next evening, Jim and Emily enjoyed a meal at the rib restaurant, having a great time together. Why did you forgive me, Dad? I don't know if I could have if I were in your shoes. Helping Mom with her choices was a big mistake. I feel awful about it, Jim said. But I'm so much happier with you around. In that way, I guess I'm selfish. It really makes me happy. Being close is something I want for my life, Jim expressed. I hope you're always glad I'm here, Emily replied sincerely. We used to be close, and it hurt when I realized I pushed you away. Do you think you'll ever forgive Mom? She isn't doing well without you. She's lost weight and hardly goes out. When rumors spread that Frank had something contagious, many people at her work were scared. It seems he got it from a new cashier, which affected quite a few. Your mom was the only manager involved, and that was tough for her. But your mother and I agreed to be partners. Partners should be open and trust one another, Jim admitted, but I don't trust her anymore. Emily understood, especially after seeing so many women talking to me at the pool. They were asking about you. I knew at least 4 seemed really interested. My dad owns a condo, Emily joked, smirking. Seriously, they think you're a kind, honest, attractive man. Jim modestly replied, I'm not sure about that. I just have some friends who visit now and then. I don't think they see me as anything special. It's more like I'm just around. Mom made a big mistake, Emily said. Can I come here after I finish school? I'd like to find a summer job nearby. Can I stay with you? I'd like to visit on weekends and holidays, too. It's too far to travel every day, and things are tough at home. Her choices hurt me more than I realized at the time. Jim gladly agreed. He felt so much happier spending time with his daughter. He enjoyed watching her grow up. They talked several times a week after she came back from spring break. She insisted he not attend her graduation, but he promised to come to Florida the next day, Sunday afternoon. Jim opened the door to greet Emily with a smile. When he saw Helen at his door, Jim was surprised. He felt frozen for what seemed like minutes. After about 10 or 15 seconds, he managed to relax a bit. Come on in, Helen. Can I get you a drink? He offered, trying to understand why she was there. Thanks, Jim. That would be great, Helen replied. Jim led her to the kitchen, poured 2 cups of iced tea, and sat down across from her at the table. I came to pick up Emily. She told me she's living with you. I've changed jobs and moved to Dayton. We need to figure out what to do with the house, Helen explained. You never filed for divorce, and we haven't talked, so I don't know what you want. Why did you decide to move here? Jim asked, surprised. What do you think will happen? Helen joked. I just want to stop freezing every winter while Emily's in college in Florida. Honestly, I have nothing to do there but chat. I'm not sure what Emily has told you, but your parents don't talk to me, and mine aren't much better. I feel like I've let down a lot of people, especially you, she admitted. I can't ask you to forgive me since my actions were wrong. I need a fresh start where people won't judge me. And by the way, I'm glad I didn't pass anything on to you, she continued. I know I made mistakes. She remembered Frank, the person who had caused a lot of trouble. I realized it was all my fault. I messed up my life and tried to mess up yours too. If you hadn't found out, we wouldn't be sitting here like this. I regret what I did, and I'm not sure why I thought it was okay back then. She looked down. I even pulled Emily into this mess, and that's something I'll never forgive myself for. I almost ruined her relationship with her father because I was being selfish. I thought Frank was just a silly mistake, but I didn't listen to myself. I'm really grateful you accepted her back into your life. Your support means everything to her, she added. It meant a lot to me too before I lost my way. Now that it's gone, I'd do anything to have it back. I think we should make a list of things to sell and share the money. I thought you had already filed for divorce. Isn't Frank single now? Jim asked, wanting to get clarity. That's what I've heard. But do I care about that guy? No, I really don't, Helen replied. I thought you already divorced me. I've given you enough reasons, Jim said. I'm pretty settled here. You know how much I dislike change, and divorce can shake things up. Maybe we should talk about this now, she suggested. I suppose so. If it were up to me, I'd prefer to stay married, but my past choices don't really back that up, do they? I know you're too good of a man to stay with someone who isn't honest. I always knew that, but I kept hoping you wouldn't find out. Where are you staying tonight? Helen asked. We have time to talk about selling the house and other things in the next week or 2. I'm going to find a motel when I leave here. There's one near Highway 95, pretty close to Home Depot, Helen said, mentioning her new job there starting next week. Emily went to the store to give us some space, but she'll be back soon, and I need to leave. Emily has 2 single beds in her room. Jim suggested that you could stay there if she's okay with it. Wouldn't that be awkward? I know I haven't been her favorite person lately, and I understand why. I'll be fine. If Emily doesn't mind, we can ask her when she returns, Jim replied. Fortunately, Emily didn't mind sharing the room with her mother temporarily. In the following days, the three of them started to settle back into their daily routines. Jim kept his distance from the pool and other women while Helen was living with him because he didn't want to upset her. A few women came to the pool and asked when she would be leaving. Helen started one evening after Emily went to a concert. They always talk about your big collection of things and which ones they like best. It's actually pretty amusing if you think about it. They almost told me I ruined their lives. Have you really made them happy, Jim? I'm impressed. Too bad I didn't make an impression on you before I met Frank, Helen added. Jim felt himself getting frustrated. I won't apologize for cheering these women up. None of them are married, and they know I'm not looking for anything serious. I try to make them happy, and they enjoy that. How about a little fun with me? Helen asked. Just for one night. I want to make up for all the trouble I caused you. Jim insisted that he wasn't the same man she remembered. I'm more confident now. I tell these women what I want, and they seem to like it. I never let them stay more than one night. So, stay with me just for tonight. I can handle whatever you want. It will help me feel better about everything, and I'll do my best to make you feel good too, Helen promised. Jim thought about what she said for a few moments before making a choice. 10 minutes later, they were in his room together. Wow, Helen gasped, catching her breath. That was amazing. You've really grown. Thanks, Jim. As Helen moved her things from Jim's room to Emily's, she heard Emily's voice. You two were quite loud. I'm glad you're finished so I can get some sleep. Helen spent the summer with Emily and Jim. She slept in Emily's second bed and visited Jim often. She often told Jim he was the only man she would ever be with. Jim simply nodded in agreement. After the first night, Jim noticed that Helen often counted the items in the bowl. He realized she was trying to give him everything she had, hoping to keep him away from the other women in their building. Helen felt uneasy about that. Her work ended at 10 p.m., and Jim usually got home around 5. At least twice a week, she would return to find clean sheets on his bed and a few items missing from the bowl. Since she had to leave for work at 2 p.m., she spent most of her mornings by the pool. The other women were not unkind to her. It was clear they all knew her marriage was struggling and that she had played a role in its troubles. Helen understood that when one of the women made a comment or asked a question, it was meant to be a hint. Helen, did you choose the new blue bedding for Jim's room? Susan Struthers asked one morning. It matches the curtains and carpet nicely, doesn't it? Yes, Monica said. And it's a very manly color. Jim is a very manly man, Helen replied. Jim, you shouldn't let these women tease you, Helen argued that night. I'll give you all the care you need. Am I not enough for you? Jim answered firmly. I won't see any of these women again. Then why are there 2 items missing from the bowl today? How does everyone know about your new bedding? Helen asked. Jim simply smiled and said, I really have no idea.
What's up, story lovers? This is the Story Guy, and if you're hungry for crazy tales and mind-blowing narratives, you've come to the right place. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button so you don't miss out on our weekly dose of crazy cheating stories, fun fiction and gut-ripping comedy from around the world. But that's not all. We also create our own original stories, and trust me, you won't find these anywhere else. Want even more spine-tingling reads? Head down to the description and grab our exclusive story collections. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.